And hello again, Year 11. Okay, last lesson we looked at sustainable transport and you studied Curitiba in Brazil that had the BRT system. Today we're going to do a few questions based on sustainable transport. Some of them will be shorter answers, so they're only worth a couple of marks each, but obviously they all still count. We're going to have a go at a couple of 6 markers, which are slightly longer, and then one 9 marker. And the other objective to this session is obviously for you to be providing more evidence for assessment for your teachers. So let's kick off straight away with a couple of 2-mark questions. Study the figure below, an ISO-line map of air pollution levels. The map was produced for a GCSE controlled assessment investigation on traffic pollution levels in central London. Right, well, let's have a look at it. Let's have a look at the key as well. So the key is telling us air pollution levels, 1 is low, 12 is high. We can see what the ISO lines look like. They're lines with numbers on them. We're shown that the top of the map is pointing towards north, and we're given a scale as well. Questions. Question A. Complete the ISO line for air pollution level 6 on the figure above. Now, this is a question that you can't do, but you need to have done it for the next question. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this question for you. You don't need to do this one. We're going to assess you on the others. So if we've got to show pollution level 6 here, we've got to join, looks like we're joining the dots, doesn't it? So we've got 12 here in the centre, then we've got 10 as you go out from the centre, then 8, then our next line is 6, and as we can see, it's not being completed. So we can't go through the 7. The 7 needs to stay on that side of our line. So I'm just completing it. We're going to go through the number 6. I'm just going to wait here because we've got a 7 there. We've got a 5 there. It looks like we need to join it up to here. So we're going to have to go this way and then through the middle there, because that would be 6, between the 6 and the 7, and then join it back up with the 6 there. So there's my completed ISO line. So I've done that for you for question A. Let's have a look at question B. Give 2 features of the distribution of air pollution shown on the completed map. That's why we needed to do that first question. So 2 features of the distribution. Distribution means the spread of air pollution. Now, I've told you before, you always get distribution questions in exams. And this is the acronym that I use, T. You should always look for the overall trend. Then give examples and evidence from the source, and then potentially look for some anomalies. And in order to do this, I've also given you these letters in the past, the 5 C's plus the W, and these stand for continent, country, compass, clustering, coastal, and wealth. Now, some of these will be relevant, some of them won't be. In this instance, continent is not relevant, neither is country. We can use compass directions, we can always use those. We can look for clustering. Coastal, well, that's irrelevant for this question because we're zoomed right in on a small area. And wealth, we're given no indication of wealth in this instance, so we can get rid of that too. So we can look to use the compass and we can look for clustering. So let's have a look at our general trends. I'd like you to pause this and try and think about what things you might say for the general trends of air pollution. Remember, we've got our 12 here, which is high. Then we go out to 10, 8, 6, and so on. So have a look first, pause this, and then we'll discuss some of your ideas. 3, 2, 1, pause. Okay. Well, let's have a look. We've got our 12, which is very, very clearly right bang smack at the middle of the map here, and it seems to be over a road. Now, I know this is very blurry for you, but that road says Oxford Street. Then we've got the 10, and the 10 seems to extend out along, I'm just going to draw it so you can see, this 10 seems to be extending out along that Oxford Street, doesn't it? In both directions, west and east. And then we've got the 8, and again, it kind of extends out along the road, and it's going north, it's going up that road as well. As we can see, both of these are the 10 and the 8 going up that road as well. And again, down here by Oxford Circus. So actually, we could say 2 things. We could say that the pollution seems to be highest around Oxford Street especially where Oxford Street meets Oxford Circus. So around about here, this seems to be our highest level of pollution. We could say that it seems to be there in the middle of the map. That might be a town centre. We can say that pollution seems to extend along the roads. That might be the other thing that you've picked out. You might have also said that as we get to the centre of the map, pollution levels seem to sharply rise. They go from 8 to 10 to 12 over quite a small distance near the centre of this map. Whereas as we go to the outskirts of the map, the distance between these iso lines seems to be greater. And just like contour lines on a map, when they're close together it shows steep land, when they're wide apart it shows flat land. Well, this is pollution lines. So when they're steep together, we can see sharp rises in pollution or sharp drops in pollution. And when they're far apart, then the gradient is less. There's not really much more we can pick out from the map. So pause this, and I want you to have a go at question B. Remember, it's worth 2 marks. You need to make 2 good comments. Pause. Okay, so you should have done that question now. Let's look at another question. Air pollution is one problem caused by high levels of road traffic in towns. Describe one other problem caused by high levels of road traffic in towns. Now, it's worth 2 marks, and more often than not, people only get 1 mark on this. So what I want you to do to start off with is I want you to brainstorm all problems that traffic causes in your book before we even start this question. Spend no more than 30 seconds. Off you go. Pause. Okay. Some of the things that you might have got down then. You might have said that they cause accidents with pedestrians crossing and being knocked down. You might have said that they cause accidents with cars crashing and people being injured in the cars. You might have said that they can cause road rage because people get cross. You might have said that they can raise people's stress levels because it is quite stressful being stuck in traffic. You could say that people are might be made late to work or other places of employment. You could say that it can cause a lot of noise in the area. You could say that people are late to socialising events. Okay, so we've got a number of things there that are not linked to air pollution because that's one already been given to you. So you've got 7 ideas. You might even have a few more. Now that you've got all those ideas, now I want you to pick the one that you think you can describe the best and have a go at answering that question. But for the second mark, you must make sure you link the problem to road traffic for 2 marks. For instance, if I was to take air pollution as an example, and you can't use this one, I would say air pollution is a problem because cars release carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide out of their exhaust pipes, and people breathe that in and it can cause respiratory problems, and that's linked to road traffic. Now that is a good description. I want you to describe the problem and make sure you link it to road traffic. Don't spend more than 2 minutes answering the question. Pause this now, do the question, and then unpause. 3, 2, 1, pause. Okay, next we're going to have a go at question D. Explain how the problems caused by high levels of road traffic in towns can be reduced. Now, you've already brainstormed all the possible problems caused by high levels of road traffic. So how can we reduce road traffic? Now, again, I don't just want one answer. Right now, I want you to brainstorm all possible ways that we can reduce traffic in towns. Okay, try and get at least 5 things. Now, you don't need to make this up. You need to think about what we do in Nottingham, for instance. What does Nottingham do to try and stop people using cars and to reduce the traffic in our city centre? Brainstorm as many things as you can, and after you've done that, unpause me. Go. Okay, So you might have said that we can introduce public transport systems like buses and trams to try and get people using public transport, which will take cars off the road. You might have said we could put cycle lanes in to try and encourage people to cycle, or pedestrian routeways. You might have said that we can actually pedestrianise town centres, so car traffic is not allowed in those particular places. You might have suggested that we can introduce things like park and ride, where people park their cars outside of the city and bus in. You might have said that we can put car parking prices really, really high, which will discourage people from using their cars. You might have said that we can introduce parking levies to businesses in town centres, which means they have to charge their employees for using the car park. Again, this stops people from using their cars. What else could we have? Well, that's probably it. There were 7 ideas there. You might have come up with other things. Now, again, this time you're going to have a go at answering the question. You need to pick the methods. In fact, I would say pick a couple of methods that you think are the best and explain how they work to reduce road traffic. So, for instance, if I was to pick park and ride, I would say park and ride is a method where people drive their cars to the edges of the cities, they then park them for the day, and then they take the bus into the town centre. This reduces traffic in town centres because buses can transport 60, 70 passengers in one go rather than having 60 or 70 cars on the road. This can reduce problems such as air pollution and traffic accidents and people being late to work because they're stuck in traffic. Now that's my example using park and ride, and I've explained how, I've explained the method, I've explained why it takes cars off the road, and I've explained how it then reduces the problems. So you've got to pick your method now. Explain how it works first, make sure you explain how it reduces traffic, and you must make sure you explain how it then reduces the problem. So make sure you link back. It's worth 4 marks. Spend 5 minutes, please. No less than. I want a good answer. Pause this and do that question. Okay, let's move on. It's going to get slightly harder now. We're going to go for a 6 marker. Explain how the development of public transport is reducing traffic pressures in urban areas. Now, it is actually a slightly different question to the one that you've just done. This one, you have to use an example you have studied. Now, your example is Curitiba in Brazil. That's the name of the place. And the example is the bus rapid transit that was developed in Curitiba to try and get people off the roads and onto public transport. So before you start on this question, you need to scribble down now in your book as much as you can remember about Curitiba's BRT system. I've given some ideas in brackets there. How frequent was the bus service? How quickly did they manage to get the bus service up and running? Roughly, how much did it cost? Now, I don't need a number here, but was it expensive? Was it cheap? How did people make payments? Did they make payments when they got on? Did they buy tickets beforehand? Why did they do it like that? How did it work in terms of the lanes? Was it travelling in its own lane? Was it in and amongst the traffic? And so on. What were the routes? Roughly, a rough pattern of the routes. What did they say in the video? How successful was it? How often was it being used? Get some numbers to back up that. And any other things that refer to the sustainability of that project. You need to pause this now, scribble down as much as you can remember, look back in your book. When you've done that, unpause. Okay, so you might remember that it was incredibly frequent, a bus every 60 seconds, so there were no waiting times. This makes people want to use it because people hate waiting. So if you don't have to wait, great. You might remember it was built within a couple of months, so they could get this up and running very quickly to reduce the congestion problem in Curitiba. Payments were made using the boarding tubes. So there was no queuing and waiting on the buses while people messed around trying to find the right change. They could have their ticket ready to go, so it was a fast service. That's why it was able to come every 60 seconds and people were never late. The cost, it was kept free, it was kept not free, it was kept cheap for everyone, regardless of the distance you were travelling, which made it great for those people that lived, for the poorest people that lived on the edge of the cities. Its lane structure, it travelled in its own road. It did not travel on the same road as cars, therefore it never ever got caught up. The main routes were also the main arterial routes into the city centre, and they went north, west, east, and south. They went all over the city, right into the city centre and to the outskirts. Its success. It went from carrying 25,000 passengers per day, routes per number of journeys per day, to more than 2 million journeys per day. That's how successful it was. They even had to extend the buses to call them triple articulated carriages, because they ended up having to attach 3 together as just one bus, because so many people were using it. Other things about the success, it's leading the way in South America, and many other cities have copied this as a model. That proves how successful it is. 99% of Curitibans love Curitiba and they like the sustainability of the transport. That's more evidence that it's successful. And that shows you that it's sustainable. The other thing that you could have mentioned with sustainability is the fact that it pays for itself. All the money that they get from the tickets that they sell goes back into the development, and so therefore it pays for itself. It doesn't need subsidising in any way. Right, now that we've scribbled down all of that information, you've got the information for a good 6-mark answer on how it works and how it reduces traffic in Curitiba. So this is how you should start. You should start by saying where you studied. Keep it short. I studied Curitiba in Brazil. Then go straight into what happened. So learn and introduce the bus rapid transit in order to. Why did he introduce it? Well, he introduced it to reduce traffic congestion, because it got to the point where Curitiba's air was choked with pollution, traffic was at a standstill, and there just wasn't enough. I guess you could argue there weren't enough roads for the sheer number of cars that there were. He was even advised to widen the roads, but he chose not to. He chose to prioritise people over cars, and therefore he introduced a bus rapid transit instead. Then you need to go on to describe its features. So describe things like how frequent it was, how quick it was to build, how much they charged, the lane structure, all the things that you've brainstormed. Describe how it works. Then explain why these features are good. Why did people like it? You should be saying things like, it was cheap for everyone, so people wanted to use it. It was regular. It was coming every 60 seconds, so there was no waiting times. The system was up and running in 3 months. So really go to town on why it was so successful. And then finish your answer by stating its success in reducing the traffic. And remember, the reason why it's reduced traffic is because people like the system. They like the system, they started to use it, and that clearly gets the cars off the road. So you must make sure you link to the fact that this public transport system reduced traffic in the city of Curitiba and reduced all that congestion and reduced all that pollution and all the negative things that go with that. Okay, you need to now spend 8 minutes on this question. So now you've got all the things you need. Use those starting sentences, spend 8 minutes, pause this, off you go. Now you've had a go at that answer, you can quickly have a go at marking. Here is a mark scheme. Pause this, have a look. If you think you can better it, go ahead, add things to it and better it, because then you can submit your best answer. Final question. Evaluate the effectiveness of an urban transport scheme you have studied. This is worth 9 marks, and you get an extra 3 for good spelling, punctuation and grammar. So, your task. I want you to use my first sentence starter exactly. Then I want you to use the others to help write up a really good response. My tip before you start, look back at last lesson's video notes to help. Look back at the stuff you've just been writing about to help. Look at my structure. I studied the bus rapid transit in Curitiba, Brazil. I believe it is effective to a partial, small or huge extent. Now I have put in bold huge there because that's my opinion. You can copy that if you want. And then look at how I'm setting the answer out. I'm going to talk about the features of the BRT, just like what you've done on the previous question. I'm going to say why it was made effective, and I'm going to say things like the cost of it made it effective, the speed that the buses came every 60 seconds made it effective, the way people could pay made it effective, the fact that it travelled in its own lanes made it effective because it never got caught up in the traffic. I'm going to list those things, and then I'm going to make a comment about its suitability. So it was also effective because it is appropriate for the wealth of the country it was designed for. You've got to remember, Curitiba was a newly emerging economy, not the wealthiest country in the world, not the poorest, but they didn't have a lot of money to spend on this. So actually, making a bus rapid transit rather than a subway was very, very effective. So you can link that to your question in evaluating the effectiveness. Then the proof that it's effective. The proof comes in the numbers and the fact that 99% of Curitibans love Curitiba. That's your proof, that's in the statistics. The fact that 2 million passenger journeys happen every day. The fact that they had to extend the size of the carriages because so many people were using it. That's your proof. Get that down in your answer. Then you might want to give a couple of the negatives. Think back to last lesson for those couple of negatives, which were very small. And then finally, you must make sure you conclude. Conclude with your main reasons for backing up your view, which is that it was hugely effective. Pause this. You must spend at least 11 minutes on this question. You must write with very good spelling, punctuation and grammar, and you should be trying to use key language throughout in order to get the full 3 marks. Pause this and then move on for the final slide. Okay, your final slide. Now you should have done all of these questions. So for you, your homework should be submitting it to the teacher. If you haven't quite finished any of these questions, please do so. And your homework is to get this submitted to your teacher so that they can mark and build up their evidence base for you. Okay, folks, thanks for listening. Cheerio, goodbye.